Hello, my name is Erin, and I have never done a podcast before, but this will be my first one, and I've decided to call it Melancholic Madness because I want to speak about things that are a little sad and uncomfortable, and other people probably won't speak about. So, today we're going to talk about PTSD and service dogs, how these have affected our policy in America, and where we go from here. So we're going to start by the first mention of anything even close to a service dog, which is in Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, and that was in 1973. However, guide dogs had a whole movement that originated in Germany after World War I, which was in the 1920s. So not until 1973 were guide dogs even recognized by the law, and this was an extremely broad overview of what you would relate to a service dog by today's standards. So we didn't come up with this idea of a service dog, or at least it wasn't mentioned in the law until the 1990s, in relation to a person with disability. So this moves on from just a dog for deafness or blindness and into the realm of not only physical impairment but also mental illness. So in 1990, the ADA defined disability as a person with mental or physical impairment that substantially limited one or more major life activities, or a person who has history of such an impairment, or a person perceived by others as having such an impairment. Now, this 1973 Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act mentions people with disabilities. However, disabilities now are more than just physical. We have realized that there are mental illnesses that are so debilitating that they impair one or more of life's major activities, activities of daily living, I often refer to them as. So depression as a diagnosis was not even added into a physician's diagnosable syndromes until the 1980s, as was PTSD, also added in the 1980s. They would instead refer to it as shell shock, or for PTSD they would say shell shock, or for depression they would say something like a melancholic disposition. And in the 1950s, they found out that a medication that they were using for tuberculosis was making the patients happier. And so they started prescribing this off-label to people who had a melancholic disposition. It was not until 1987, from the 1950s to 1987, that a medicine specific to the disability of depression was made. There was another medication in 1991 and another medication in 1992. So we're talking decades before medication was developed. So, with that being said, we are going to talk about service dogs and how they are now recognized by the ADA, and it's not just guide dogs. We have a whole new definition, and so at first the ADA said service animals, And they kind of left it open to interpretation. And that ended up being a problem. People were trying to get on aircrafts with service rabbits. People were bringing tarantulas to the store. I mean, if you name it, you can think of it. It probably happened. So much so that in 2011, now once again, 1990 to 2011 were 21 years after the act was signed. Now we have to redefine what a service animal is. And the Department of Justice decided that a service animal is either a dog or a miniature horse. And this animal has to be extremely well behaved. It can be any breed of dog or miniature horse, but it must perform a task or tasks to mitigate the symptoms or seriousness of the disability. Now, this task has to be related directly to the person's disability. So, if somebody needs a service dog to help them walk or a mobility dog, you can't be like, it grabs my pills for me. That's not related to your disability per se. Now, if you say the task is, it guides me because I have blindness, that's obviously very directly correlated to your disability. However, even though still a broad action has been taken, we don't have more specific measures in place. And so accessibility continues to be an issue for these disabled people. And I mean, people are getting denied all kinds of things that they should be able to have. So I'm going to introduce Kevin and Lucky. Kevin.
Hi, my name is Kevin. I am a disabled Marine Corps veteran. I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, and that is when I began to learn about service animals and what they could possibly do. And then Lucky is a 7-year-old Shetland sheepdog. He is 18 pounds, a bit on the smaller side, but a very intelligent dog. I've had him his entire life, but for 6 of those 7 years, he has been task trained and out working, assisting me.
So, Kevin, what disability does Lucky help with?
So Lucky directly helps with post-traumatic stress disorder.
So what does he do to help with that disability?
So Lucky provides several tasks to help mitigate that disability. One of the things is grounding. Grounding is just bringing me back into the present, to keep me from having my thoughts trail my mind away. He also creates a barrier going around blind corners, and he also searches rooms to let me know whether or not somebody is inside the room or in my house or my living situation.
So how does Lucky search those rooms? Like, do you go in with him, or does he go in on his own? Can you explain that to us?
So I do use the term search kind of loosely. As far as he goes into the room, he'll enter the room and he'll spin around about 3-4 feet into the room, and he will alert based on whether or not someone's in there. So if someone's in there, he'll, directly look at them. He may raise his tail as someone's in there that's not supposed to be in there. He will just react differently to whether or not someone's in there, and that would just allow me to address the situation as needed. It also helps to calm me down as he goes through to know that the house is safe, other than me having to go through and inspect every single corner, underneath every single bed, underneath or in every closet.
Okay, and how is this directly related to your disability? Is this something that you worry about with your disability, that there's going to be someone inside?
Yes, so I've very much with post-traumatic stress, it's very high anxiety level, a very hyper-vigilant mindset, pretty much 24/7. Good days, and then there's bad days. But when I go through, it just gives me that sense of ease that it's okay. So I have these habits that I will clear my house, or when I was living in an apartment, we would go through every time we left, um, just to make sure that it was okay. So if I took the trash out, we'd have to go through the house. As far as scratching my hands, it is an anxious behavior where I'll start to scratch my hands because I'm thinking about something that happened in the past, or hypothetical situations that don't even truly exist. They're just something my mind is making up. I'll scratch my hands to the point that they start to bleed, and Lucky will nudge me if he sees me doing so, and that'll force me to have to pet him. It brings me back to the current time, to the present. Or if I cover my face, I'll do the same thing. Um, as far as creating a barrier, I hate to go around corners, blind corners, such as entering like a public bathroom. Usually there's a doorway or an open doorway, but there's a wall that you can't see around. And Lucky will enter, again, do the same thing as clearing, kind of spin around, and he just creates that barrier as I continue to walk into, and that keeps me from coming face to face with another individual, which could then kind of boost, or if that were to happen, kind of send me down this path of worry, that I wasn't prepared, that I, have to be more vigilant. I was complacent. All these negative thoughts kind of start to escalate, and it's like this rabbit hole of a mood change. Then.
So now, with scratching your hands, you say that you need to pet Lucky. Now, what if you just, pet him for a little bit and then you're like, okay, I did it. I'm going to go back to scratching my hands. What will happen then?
Right. So the good thing about service dogs, and Lucky in particular, is the amount of attention that he has to me as his handler. We spend every waking moment together, and so he is consistently, observing me. And if I were to do something such as scratch my hands, and he nudges me, and then it does happen, I'll 2 seconds later go right back down into that deep thought and start scratching my hands, and then I'll have to pet him again. And to him, it's this great reward that I get to pet him. Like, he is happy because he's getting this attention. He might get a treat, or he's just getting the love and the affection. He's getting the praise. And to him, that's great. And he'll continue to do it until, I go to sleep, or the day is over, or it's the end of time. He will just work and work and work. And that is, in part to his personality. It comes with his breed as a working dog. But it also comes down to the fact that we've had so much training together, and we've built a bond over these 7 years of his life, on top of the 6 years of just working.
So I am glad that you mentioned his training. So how was Lucky trained?
So Lucky is a self-trained service animal. He under the ADA, you can either self-train or you can have professionally trained service animal. For Lucky and his tasks, I was able to self-train him for a couple reasons. One is that he is an extremely intelligent dog, and he was able to really pick up on the training, not just his tasks, but everyday training, from rolling over, playing dead, to doing his tasks, on a daily basis. He's got very natural instincts towards working, but his tasks were also relatively easy to train. Um, Something like mobility assistance, I personally wouldn't have the slightest clue in how to do so to properly train any animal, dog, to do that. For Lucky, it was fairly simple to kind of draw up an idea, kind of work with it, kind of change it around here and there to perfect the task. And that's something that we still continue to do, is modify to meet my needs um, as the disabled person. And again, Lucky is just one of those dogs that I'm able to do so with, as of right now, to continually work with and modify things as needed.
So, have you, since Lucky was young, you've been training him to do these specific tasks. Now that he's gotten a little bit older, you mentioned that he's 7. Have you tried to implement like any new tasks to help mitigate your symptoms, or do you kind of just stick with the same stuff?
Um, One of the tasks that he used to do when we first started working together as a team is he would carry my medication, because I was real bad about taking my medication. And granted, it was really just him having a vest with a pouch on that I put the medicine in. But that was something that we did do. And as I worked and got better with my medicine, then I eliminated that task. But there are also other tasks that we work on outside of things that aren't necessarily beneficial to my disability now, but may benefit in the future. Um, so one thing that we work on is the handicap accessible buttons that would open, public or doors to like businesses or public buildings. A lot of them are a little bit higher, so he cannot reach them. But occasionally we'll come across one that is a bit lower that we can work on him pressing the button, then going straight into his search routine as well. And that's just one thing that if I can have him do it, then it just makes it life easier for me. It makes my disability less of an issue. Another thing is to look for my wife. If I were to ever, get injured or be stuck in a certain spot for whatever reason, especially if it were something related to my post-traumatic stress, that I do ask him, to go find my wife, and he will lead me or whoever's on the leash to go find my wife. And it's something that he hasn't perfected, so it's not something that like I would want to trust to use or would consider as a task right now. But it is something that I'm continuously working on pretty much a daily basis of him doing. And again, for him, it's like this big game, so it's great. He does it, he gets rewarded, he's working. And then for me, it's just something that I know I'll have once we're capable enough as a team to get that to work. He'll be able to do that for me, and that's just a little bit more of me being at ease given my mental health.
Very nice. So you self-trained Lucky. You don't have to go to a trainer for that? You don't have to have a trainer for a service animal?
So again, in the United States, you do not have to have a professional trainer. You could self-train the dog or miniature horse. Now, there are other places such as Canada where they do require a professional trainer to train the animal. Now, the difference is, like, again, with Lucky, it was relatively easy for me to train him. Now, you could pair me with a different dog and it would be maybe more difficult because I don't connect with the dog. Or, you could put Lucky with someone else and Lucky won't learn as good either. So it's very important when you're self-training that you have to be able to manage these these training sessions and the tasks at hand. And you have to be sure that the tasks are going to be directly related to your disability. But also, again, like if I were to, if Lucky were to be a mobility assistance dog, which he's too small to be that, but if he were to be that, I wouldn't know how to train him to support me, to help me stand up, to, let me lean on him, or as a guide dog for visual impairments. I don't know how to do those. That's a very advanced level, and I think that that's where the professional trainers really come in, and these nonprofit organizations really help Americans out with these services, to train these dogs and work together with these dogs for a lifetime.
Very nice. So now I hear it all the time, that people have their service animals registered, or they have a certification that they've given to their landlord so that they don't have to pay this big deposit fee. So is Lucky certified or registered, or what's up with that?
So they're under the Americans with Disabilities Act. There is no certification in the United States for a service animal, and that in part is to a big part of that is because of self trainers, and liability issues. But for housing requirements, you fall under the Fair Housing Act, and then for accessibility, you're under the Americans with Disabilities Act, and under airlines, you're under the Air Carrier Access Act, and they all kind of mean the same thing, but each one is a little bit different. And issues that I've had with those types of things are, especially being a veteran going through the Department of Veterans Affairs, is up until very recently, my mental health provider, my psychiatrist, wasn't even able to endorse or confirm that my dog was a service animal in any aspect, just because they had this policy in place that wouldn't allow them to do it. Now that's slightly changed, but for service animals through the VA, it has to be through a certain organization that the VA has partnered with, which is a very reputable organization, but it's something that I have not gone through. And so my doctor has gone above and beyond for me for things like renting my apartment, where he's filled out the appropriate paperwork. He said, I can't say this is a service animal, but I seen him with Kevin, and Kevin's got this disability, and he filled out the paperwork pretty much saying, like, yeah, this is a service dog, but I can't officially say it's a service dog. And the same was for when I flew. Lucky and I flew on an airplane. My doctor provided documentation for me, but there is no actual certification, which I feel is something that needs to be changed because of the amount of people that do take advantage of these laws, and it really kind of puts at harm not only myself and others that are out there with disabilities, but also the dogs that are working. To just go online and have somebody say, this is my dog's a service animal or whatever. Like, no, like, my dog needs to be trained, my dog needs to be paying attention to me, my dog needs to be working for me at all times, my dog, can't be distracted, my dog needs to be there for me because my life depends upon it. And with these other people going out to fake this stuff, fake these certifications, it creates a lot of chaos. So right now there's not, but there, in my opinion, there should be, and I think that's something we're working to. If you gauge it based on like the Air Carrier Access Act or the redefining of a service animal under the ADA, these things are in the process, but it's very slow to catch up with modern times.
So there are two things that really sparked my interest with what you said. You said that your doctor hasn't been able to really state, like, Lucky is a service dog, Kevin needs a service dog. Kevin has PTSD. Now, you were telling me before that you are 100% permanently and totally disabled through the VA. So you have that rating. They acknowledge, like, yes, you are disabled, but they refuse to give you this that I don't know what exactly you would call it, like a letter of proof of him being a service dog or something like that. And that kind of sparked my interest because the guide dogs movement um, was because of World War One in the 1920s. That guide dog movement was because so many people had lost their eyesight, and the VA definitely backed guide dogs. So it's very interesting to me that they did not give them the opportunity to designate a service animal or not designate a service animal. The other thing that I wanted to touch on was that, I know that Lucky does these tasks for you, entering a room and clearing a room and everything that you've explained to us thus far. But what about the animals that, are just there as like a companion or like, more of just a comfort? Is that a task?
Right. So, as far as like the VA and the guide dogs movement and things of that nature, um, the VA could uh, prescribe and go through this outside organization for these guide dogs and also mobility assistance dogs. Just recently, though, even though Department of Veterans Affairs has been at the forefront of mental health since World War, well, honestly, since the Civil War. That just recent though, it has been able to endorse service animals for mental health, but it's a very strict guideline, and again, it's got to go through these outside agencies. And so, like I said, Lucky's been working for 6 years, so now I can't. I would either have to abandon Lucky and everything we've worked for to get a dog through the VA. And that's even if I meet the standards set forth by this government agency.
Right.
Or like I can continue to work outside and never have my doctor have the ability to say these things.
Right. Okay.
So, but and then for regarding Lucky's, regarding like emotional support and things like that. So there are different animals. We're all familiar with military working dogs. Law enforcement canines.
Yeah, the canine units.
And I've worked hand in hand with military working dogs and what they've done. And then there's emotional support animals, therapy animals. Dogs do search and rescue dogs. They do almost everything, and that's because the dogs, as doctors dive into their psychology and look at them, they realize how amazing they are as working, capable creatures, and they've done it for thousands and thousands of years. But emotional support in and of itself is not a task. So a task I always kind of view as an actual trick that the dog would do. So just like you could tell the dog to sit, lay down, if the dog does something on a command, that would be more of a task related. And there's always, wiggle room on certain things, but by definition, that's more closely related to what a task would be. And so that's some of the powers that these public places or private businesses have to enforce and protect their businesses, is that they can ask what the tasks are, and that's a very revealing question when the tasks aren't evident. So if you have a guide dog, more than likely you're going to be able to tell from a guide from what you see that that's what the dog's job is. But for
Right.
an invisible disability, not just mental health, but you have things like seizure disorders, you have diabetic episodes, you have just heart issues. It is crazy what the dogs are capable of doing, but those you can't see. And so that's where the task would come. Asking the task would be a very important question. Now, Lucky does provide me emotional support, a bond of 7 years, of 6 years being side by side. Like, you can't break that, being right next to me on my darkest days, right there. And if we're inside all day, it's okay. If we're outside all day, it's okay. He's just there with me. But he also does do things for me that aren't tasks, but they are just his natural things. So one thing I really enjoy is that he barks out the window. He's a very alert and vocal dog when we're at home, and I very much like that. I like to know when people are coming by, so that's something that I haven't corrected him out of. Yeah, I guess corrected wouldn't even be the correct term, because I do enjoy him doing that. Another thing is just having that leash in my hand while we're out at the store, communicating with him through my leash, or through the leash. Um, I'm constantly telling him to, like, kind of come back, or he, like, moves because he goes to look, so then I need to look. And so we're very much talking through each other to each other without having to say any actual words. Um, and I carry a treat pouch, and he's very treat oriented, just as most humans are very treat oriented.
Right.
He'll paw at me if I'm not paying attention to him, because he'll want another treat, and that very much just keeps me from going down these rabbit holes, initially. um, or to just practice these tasks, to practice, like, in the store. I could just go to a private section of the store, you know, and we could work on training a little bit. So it's way more beneficial than just his tasks. But as far as the law is concerned, it's just those specific things that he does that would allow him to meet the definition of a service animal. But he does so much more for me, that, like, I couldn't imagine going without those things.
Yeah, I definitely understand. I mean, you guys obviously have an inseparable, indestructible bond. Um, so, explain a time. I know that you've already talked to us about, like, hypothetical situations. Can you explain a time, just a memory or something, where Lucky helped, like, aid you in a time where your disability was really causing you a major impairment of your active daily life?
Um, there's honestly more times than I could, like, it's on a regular basis that he is coming up to me because I'm nudging, or I'm rubbing my hands, or covering my face, or um, we will the, go out to the gym, which is this place that we very much enjoy. It's our home away from home, and just go into the bathroom. He will go in and perform his tasks. One of the biggest things was, with post-traumatic stress comes a lot of suicidal ideations, and when those start to take root, like, then you begin preparations. And I remember preparing one time and having everything set and just sitting on the floor, and he came up to me and he just laid right next to me with his head on me, like, I'm here. If you're gonna do it, I'm here. If you're not, I'm here. And just he like that confiding, in him, like, to have that love is just a certain level. But most of the time, prior to getting to that point, he is nudging me. He is, uh, going around those corners for me. I literally, he's, the the old first in, last out. He is literally the first in to block that doorway, or to search the house or the hotel room, or wherever we're at. And no hesitation on his part, just happy to work, just happy to be there for me.
That sounds like some really intense moments, and that just once again solidifies that you two have this extremely indestructible bond, and I'm really glad that he's here for you. Where can Lucky go with you? Like, has there's this law in place, in particular the one we're talking about, the Americans with Disabilities Act. Um, Now, even though this law is in place, obviously Lucky is kind of able to go wherever. In what you're telling me, it seems like he can go anywhere with you. But do people know the law? Like, has Lucky ever been denied access somewhere?
It is extremely common to be denied access with Lucky, at least initially. And I shouldn't say commonplace to be denied, but it is, I would say, in 6 years, it's become commonplace to me, where I walk in to a building, especially one that we've never been to, and I am anticipating, like the anxiety is building, that we will be denied access. And it's not denied access because Lucky's doing anything wrong. It's denied access because of ignorance on the representative of the business that we're entering, on their part, for not knowing the law, not knowing the questions under the law that they are allowed to ask to determine whether or not, Lucky is a service animal. And even though it's not required, I put on his vest. I have a leash that I put Velcro on that's got "Do Not Pet." Like, I make him this walking billboard. He is walking directly by my side. I make sure as his handler that I am upholding my half of the responsibility, of taking him in public, which is to make sure he's on his best behavior, to make sure that he is, not making a mess, not becoming a nuisance, not doing anything. But many times when we walk into the building, being on our best behavior, we get things from downright denial to asking for our papers, to telling us bizarre things that I need to put Lucky in a cart, and to which all of these are wrong. And it's very much gotten to the point that it becomes, again, like this anxious buildup that it's happening. It's like this doom that it's coming, and that really, kind of sets my mental health back, my disability back, because I am reluctant to go out, and I am reluctant to do the things I need to do, and then it also removes the faith that I have in these laws, that in these people, the promise that people will care about you, not just as a veteran, but as someone that is battling with a disability, and I know that I'm not alone in that scenario. One scenario is that we were denied to go into a casino, and this individual was the security guard at the front, whose sole purpose was accessibility to the building. And the gentleman asked for our papers, and for Lucky's papers. And I very much became upset, and I started to record, because I didn't want it to be he said, she said anymore. So I have my phone handy. That's another thing that I've gotten used to, is having my phone handy to record in case this happens, to protect myself and Lucky. And a manager ended up coming over, and then the security guard, once I started recording, he tried to tell me that I couldn't record, and then he called over a police officer So it made this situation where I was just trying to live my life as everybody else that had proceeded through that entryway as a regular person. Now I was being denied. Not only was I being denied access, I was being
You were being made a spectacle. Like
right.
everybody was watching you. Yeah, that sounds like a really intense situation, and it was literally making a mountain out of a molehill. Like he just very much escalated the situation instead of de-escalating. Wow. And I mean, did the cops, did they know the law? Were they able to help you with access to the building?
No, thankfully a supervisor came up, and then the head supervisor ended up very much apologizing and taking full responsibility. But the police officer actually was trying to tell me it's no big deal. It's no big deal. But these are my rights as a human being, as a United States citizen, that I have equal access just as everybody else, and everybody else proceeded through prior to me with no issues. As long as they, this happened to be a casino, so as long as they showed their ID and they were of age, they entered. So I was going to do the same thing, and this police officer was trying to tell me it's no big deal. It's no big deal. It's no big deal. Well, it is a big deal.
That had to have been extremely frustrating for you. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. There was another instance where we were out to eat, and it was for Halloween, and lucky we had been to this restaurant many times before, and Lucky always has his vest on. And when we walked into the restaurant this time, Lucky had his vest on. I wanted to make sure that there weren't any issues. I want to do again my part to reduce the likelihood of a situation arising. So even though vests aren't required, I have Lucky wear his vest. I want to make sure that people see what he is. There's no, like craziness going on. People thinking, "What's this guy doing?" and all this, and especially the restaurant, the owners of the business. I want them to know, make their job as easy as possible as well. And so we walked in, and we were there, and after some time, I asked the individuals at the front, again, the ones controlling the accessibility of the building, if I could possibly take Lucky's vest off and put a costume on. I asked him, I said, I don't want to cause trouble. If you think it's going to be an issue, I'll leave the vest on. It's not a big deal. It was, not necessary to do it. I just kind of wanted to do it in the spirit of the day. And they let me do it. But then after about 10-15 minutes, we had been in a different part of the restaurant, a little bit farther into the building, and a police officer that was off duty but working as security came up and again asked me for my papers. And not only did he ask me for my papers, he asked me, he demanded that I show him my papers, talking down to me. And I just very much got upset, to put it mildly. And I told him to leave me alone because he didn't know the law. And he tried to tell me that he was the law, and he did know the law, something along those lines. And that just carried more into it. So not only are you violating my rights as a disabled person, you're also violating the law, and you're the person that's supposed to be upholding the law.
So it seems like it could be kind of intimidating when you have this authority figure telling you that you're wrong, but these are your rights. You've heavily researched them, and so you have this authority figure telling you that you are wrong, but you know you're right. So how do you fight back against that? Were you able to advocate for yourself? Do you have someone who advocates for you? Do you just leave the building at that point?
Very much, it depends on the situation, but given that specific situation, my wife actually very much advocated for me. Given my mood, it was better that she put herself in there to try and advocate, and not only advocate for me, but also inform this police officer that he was wrong but this was the right thing. This is the law. So he knew going forward, and hopefully would take that knowledge with them. Again, it's not about trying to get someone in trouble. That's not my job to get someone in trouble. It's my job to protect myself. It's my job to then help any way possible because I'm capable. Now, there's others out there that aren't capable. So how do they fight back, right? They don't have a wife that can do that stuff. They don't have the ability to stand up for themselves, whether it's because of their disability or just they're not in a position that they can do that, because of their personality, whatever the case is. Like it kind of falls on our shoulders to have to do these things. And again, thankfully, in that specific situation, I had my wife to advocate for me. I had my wife to advocate for all persons that do have a service animal, that their life depends on that service animal. And so she was very much able to kind of calm the situation down. She was able to calm me down. And again, this is, like you go into that fight or flight type of reaction because it comes with the territory of post-traumatic stress, of hypervigilance, of, this anxiety. And then on top of the 6 years of dealing with these accessibility issues, it builds up over time.
So at that point, do you, with your disability, because, I mean, if anybody gets confronted by a police officer, it's a little startling. Some people more so than others, depending on their, like, socioeconomic or, whatever demographic they fall into. Some people are more vulnerable to interactions with the police. So at that point, with having PTSD and having to have this interaction with this authority figure that's then challenging your knowledge and your rights, do you feel like this person has now become the threat?
Absolutely. Absolutely. They are, like on multiple levels, they're attacking me, but on this level of, again, like it becomes that fight or flight. Like this guy can come at me with this combative attitude. He is well capable of causing harm, and that's an initial response that, depending on, for me specifically, like that it's this, I have to fight back or I have to get out of there. And again, it's like a tactical move. Like, what do I do? And sometimes it's split second, and that's how a lot of catastrophes happen when it comes to mental health. Are these split second decisions, and especially this person that's supposed to uphold the law and hold themselves to this higher standard to act, that way. To it's one thing to not know, and then to
Right.
be like, time out, let me learn.
Right. Yeah.
Because I don't know, and it's another thing to be like, I know the law. So that causes all these problems. And again, like that with post-traumatic stress, you start to really change your view of the world then, and continues over time to form these opinions. And at one time you could think that the world is great, but then you have these negative interactions, and then you think the world is not great, or you get these all or nothing mindsets. And it's, again, one of those things like this fits into that category. So I'm worried about my rights. I'm being attacked by this person of power coming after me, that is a threat to me and my dog. And then it builds this pattern that, people don't care, or that specifically him, police are bad or whatnot, like these negative mindsets come with that territory.
Absolutely. So you're describing, I mean, I would classify this as a type of harassment, kind of unprovoked, comes over to you, tells you you're wrong, asking you to leave or for your papers, very uninformed type of individual. I would classify that as kind of like a harassment. And so that kind of answered the first part of my next question. So I'm going to go ahead and ask the second part of the question. Have you been discriminated against due to your need for your service dog? Have you just outright been discriminated?
Yes, this is kind of a prime example of doing so. But then there's these other, little things that go on as well. Like, why does this guy have his dog with him? What? And again, it's like why? Oh, that's why I want to have Lucky wear his vest, because it lessens the occurrence of these things, or people coming up to Lucky to pet him, or telling me how they wish they could bring their dog with. And it's these nuisance things where you can't go shopping, simply just go shopping. It's got to be this whole ordeal because of ignorance of the public, because these negative views. I've had people complain to me, or complain to uh, where I'm at. I actually go to the YMCA, and I've had 2 complaints now about Lucky, and they're like, well, what's the dog doing? And they're like, well, it's just laying there. So what's the problem then? What? I don't understand. Like, the dog's not doing anything wrong, so what are we complaining about? And again, like, Lucky wasn't doing anything. We were informed about these complaints due to their policy and how they address it, and they review camera footage. And again, like, Lucky was doing everything that he is required to do by law as a service animal. I was doing everything I was required to do as a handler, yet we still had this bias against us for no reason. And then, we were attempted to be discriminated against, attempted to, have these false accusations thrown at us. And then we got the accessibility issues. And then I've had, with being at a pool, and being told that Lucky can't be at the pool. Well, Lucky can't be in the water, but Lucky can be on the deck. Lucky can be in a restaurant, but Lucky can't be sitting on the seat. Like, I know the rules, but then all these people kind of nitpick and really have problems, and they try to say, oh, they're allergic. And, like, I do everything that I do to protect myself and Lucky, and to abide, again, by my 50% of the law.
So, have you ever been just straight up denied access? Like, first of all, you brought up allergies. Like, is allergy problems a significant response to, like, I can't wait on you. I can't, I don't know, I can't check you out at the grocery store at my cash register because I am allergic to dogs, or I'm scared of dogs, or have you, um, my second part of my question is, have you ever just been told, you can't come here?
So, for the first part, no, allergies are not, or a fear of dogs is not a reason to not handle someone that has a service animal. And we've had that where at doctor's offices where the nurse will try to say, I can't do it. Well, that's not my responsibility. It is then the doctor's office responsibility to find someone that can do it if that's the way they're going to handle it. Now, again, like, an allergy, isn't necessarily a disability. And if it's to the point that that person has allergies, that it's a disability under definition, which I'm not sure what that level would be, but if that's the case, then their employer would have to make a reasonable accommodation for them. That is, again, not my responsibility as having a medical, being the person with a medical device as a service animal. That falls on the business, then the organization that these people are working for. And if the organization itself is doing these things, like, that is discrimination, then the exception would be, like, if we were in a hospital, certain places in a hospital, like, that's, worried about cross contamination or infections and stuff like that, would limit service dog, just like they would limit the public's ability to go in those places. Or like at a restaurant, the kitchen, regular people aren't just walking through the kitchen, it's just the people working there. So obviously Lucky wouldn't be able to go into those places. One thing is the VA, again, a big problem that I'm noticing is the VA doesn't allow service animals for most inpatient things. Especially when it comes to mental health, we've had learned about these residential programs. Where it's the constant supervision, constant, working towards these things to get better in that. But it's not like not forced inpatient where you're in a locked, room or whatever, or a locked section of the hospital. I'm referring to like a program where you do have the ability to go outside if you need to, or things of that nature, but still service animals aren't allowed during these programs, during these stays, and it is something that has very much prohibited me or kept me from wanting to do these inpatient things, which would have been necessary at multiple times throughout, my post-military life, and since I've had Lucky, it's something that if I can't have him, then I don't want to do it. It's part of that bond that I have. It's part of how much I rely on him. It's this big factor in determining whether or not I do it. And if I can't have him, I'm not going to do it. And it really kind of blows my mind because the VA is at the forefront of this mental health, thing, and yet they're the ones that still aren't allowing certain things to happen as far as service animals. And they do endorse certain service animals through their outside provider, but they still wouldn't even be able to bring, these service animals into these, residential programs and things like that. So it just, none of it really kind of makes sense to me. It's kind of like we're behind the times, even though we're leading the times.
Yeah,
So,
I could see how you would, I could definitely see how you would feel that. Now, I don't know about you, but I have walked around stores and I've seen, and you've talked about animals in carts. They can't make you put Lucky in a cart, but I've seen animals in carts, dogs in carts. I've seen dogs in strollers. Like, can they? Is there a reason that they would need to be in a stroller? Are these fake service dogs? Have you ever encountered a fake service dog?
yes, I've encountered many throughout the 6 years. You know, again, under the law, the Americans with Disabilities Act, it explains that the service dog should be on the ground. The exception is when the dog could be in a carrier for the person if they were to have, say, like a diabetic condition where, the scent of the breath is how the dog would alert, or a cardiac condition, or something of that nature where the dog would have to be by the person's face or their chest. Then they could be in a carrier on the person, but at no time would that dog be serving a purpose if it's in the cart. And there are other laws that prohibit animals in carts and things of that nature. But then you also have the dogs that do come in that are walking, and you can tell that they're not well behaved. They're not meeting that criteria under the ADA, which is they're pulling on their leash, or they're trying to go to other people. They're maybe being noisy or barking. They're not focused on the handler or the person with the disability if the handler happens to be a caregiver. Like that dog's job is to be there solely for that purpose. So if the dog's not doing that, then why is the dog there? That's a very telltale sign that that's occurring. And we've had instances where dogs have pulled at Lucky, or dogs have barked at Lucky, or dogs are just being noisy, and so it distracts Lucky. I mean, dogs have great hearing, so Lucky picks it up even before I do, and that's one thing that I've, again, had to deal with, was this rising occurrence of fake service animals, and again, it's not the dogs that are out there behaving if people are faking. It's the people that just assume that their dog can just come with, and they say this, and then these businesses are too scared to protect themselves, and so it's kind of a free-for-all, and the only people that suffer are those, again, with legitimate service animals and disabilities. Now again, like Lucky's got to be on a leash. Like, all his tasks require him to be on a leash. There's nothing that he does for me that would require him to be off a leash. Now, the only thing that's somewhat in between that is when he goes to search around the blind corner, I let him out at a leash length to do his job, to create that barrier between me and someone else, and that's the extent. Otherwise, he's right by my side, or he's sitting in front of me looking directly up at me. Now, certain service animals would require that ability to be off leash to pick up things for someone that does have mobility issues, that can't bend down to pick something up, something along those lines. And you can't imagine if that poor dog is off leash doing its job, and there's this other dog that's in a stroller yapping away, or a dog that's pulling on their leash trying to get to this poor dog that's trying to work. Like, that is not only like extremely dangerous because of just, you don't want a fight between two dogs, but that dog in itself, the service dog, could be traumatized by being attacked, could be traumatized by, you know, the incident, or the person that with the disability could become injured, or even worse if the dog is distracted. Imagine a visual assistance dog, a guide dog, being distracted, and this person walks and falls down a set of stairs or something like that, or, you know, bumps into something and something falls, or walks in front of a car because this other person decided to bring their dog because they wanted to just have their dog with them and fake being a service dog. It's a very, you know, increasingly commonplace to see these things, and businesses feel like they are less and less able to protect themselves, especially the bigger corporations.
Well, now we have seen in the news, or, you know, reading on Facebook, or what have you, we have seen these lawsuits, lots of lawsuits brought up against big companies, and we're talking like Walmart, we're talking UPS, we're talking Costco, like household name companies. And so I heard you, you know, kind of put it back a little bit on these companies, but can we roll it even further back to the actual act itself? Do you think that the ambiguity in the language of the act is keeping these companies from maybe exercising their rights better?
Absolutely. Like, I believe that in today's day and age, and the era of technology that we're in and we've been in, that it is entirely possible to come up with stricter guidelines for service animals. And that's something that, again, like, you know, in 2011, being more specific about what they consider to be a service animal, or the Air Carrier Access Act, where it just recently said it can only be a dog, and it's got to be older than this. Like, they got very specific with these certain things, and there's no reason that there can't be some sort of guidelines that have to be met to protect these businesses, which in turn protects the legitimate service dog and handlers out in these public places. Like, it's very easy to change these things, and for some reason we're always behind the power curve, and there's always these people taking advantage of these issues, but it could very much be taken care of. And again, it's just kind of waiting for time to catch up on these different issues, or we're waiting for something bad to happen for these issues to be corrected. And again, it's just, we're at the mercy of our lawmakers and the general public.
I think that's a very good response. You've been extremely knowledgeable, extremely helpful. Thank you for sharing your experiences with us. Thank you for giving us all of this to look forward to in the future, the possibility of maybe having a certification or a registration for service dogs, your views on how companies can better not only protect themselves, but also protect the teams, the service dog and handler teams that come into their store, corporation, whatever it may be. I will go ahead and close at this time just with a big thank you to Kevin and Lucky.